Captain Marquet's naval career took an unexpected turn when he was given command of the worst-performing nuclear-powered submarine in the Pacific.
The Santa Fe only had two problems: the worst performance in the fleet and the worst morale in the fleet.
He transformed the USS Santa Fe into one of the top-performing submarines in the entire fleet.
We got the highest score in the history of the Navy for operating the submarine 12 months later. Number two, 100% of the sailors elected to stay in the Navy, 33 out of 33.
On today's Curious CEO, Captain Marquet shares his insights on how to lead by empowering others to make decisions.
If you want people to just do what they're told, the language we use right now is perfect. If you want people to think, then the language we use right now does not fit. Don't say, just do it. You do not like that on a nuclear-powered submarine. You don't like that in real estate, banking, tech, medicine, anything. Leadership means things sail on exceedingly well after you leave because you've embedded whatever genius you have in the organization. That's what leadership is.
Dave, we were just talking before we got rolling here today about how this all happened. So, I took over as CEO from my brother 11 years ago. And shortly after taking over, I watched this fantastic 10-minute illustrated YouTube talk that you gave. And I was really taken by the philosophy of turning your followers into leaders by empowering them and helping them to make decisions. And I think as leaders, and for me especially, we've 250 people working at the company, there's some days I'm thinking, I'm working for them, they're not working for me. Or sometimes they're waiting on me to make a decision and I wish they were making the decision. And so it really, really impacted me. And I think I've absolutely tortured all of the leaders of Buffini and Company by making them watch your video over and over again. So I know of the 2.5 million views you've had, I think I'm responsible for about 1.5 million of them. Well, I want to talk about the philosophy because you were selected to captain the USS Olympia, a submarine that you knew backwards and forwards. You'd studied for years, you knew everything about it, but you didn't end up taking charge of that submarine, did you?
No. So what happens in the Navy is when you get assigned to be the submarine commander, they pull you out of your job and they send you to school for 12 months. All you do is study the ship you're going to take command of. And Olympia had a reactor plant, which I had on previous submarines. I had not been on that class of ship, but I'd been on sort of the components of it. So the torpedo tubes I was familiar with, the way the sonar system worked, the way the ship drove through the ocean, and the reactor plant and all these kind of things. And then, but on top of that, I spent 12 months. All I did was draw the wiring, draw the piping system. I mean, of course, it's a tremendous luxury to be able to do that. But I felt very confident. And now, why do we do that? Well, because the captain of the ship's going to give orders and tell people what to do. And so you need to have the right answers. And so this model of leadership, which I grew up with in the Navy, which I didn't really question. To be honest, I kind of liked it because I was the smart guy, and it only requires two things: one, knowing the right answer, and two, getting the team to do it. Now, I jokingly say coercing the team into doing it. But then people get upset and they, no, Captain, no, I don't coerce people. I inspire them to do what I want them to do, or I enlighten them, or I make it seem like it's their idea. But fundamentally, let's be honest, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, it's about me trying to get you to do what I think you should do. It's not about you doing what you think you should do. And then we pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, I'm such a great leader. I'm such a great empowerment person because I'll choose the what, and I'll let you little people, you can choose the how. And aren't I so great at empowerment? And ladies and gentlemen, that is not nearly enough. That is simply a slight tweak on the old age, industrial age way of doing business. And I'm so fed up with it. So we can do a lot better, and you can have better outcomes for you, your people, and the organization.
Well, you went from being I think the leader sometimes can think, I need to know everything. I need to be the smartest person in the room. And you were the smartest person when it came to the USS Olympia, but you weren't the smartest person in the world when it came to the ship that you actually went underway with, which was the Santa Fe.
So what happened? Yeah. So I finished this class, 12 months go by. I've got 2 weeks. I'm going to take over the ship I was assigned to. And then, so the backstory is we would receive in the Navy periodic lessons learned from other submarines. Now, at this point, the Navy had about 80 submarines. And so you'd get these things, and then once a week, there'd be 2 or 3 of them. And we'd get together as a small group and we'd go over the lessons learned. And there was a little bit of sort of chuckling and like, well, how stupid are they to do that? And oh, how could they have run into that island and blah, blah, blah. Of course, these are well-meaning people, equally trained as we are. But in any event, a disproportionate number of those lessons learned came from one submarine, the USS Santa Fe, and the captain was supposed to be there another year. The Santa Fe only had 2 problems: the worst performance in the fleet and the worst morale in the fleet, which was measured by retention. No one wanted to be on the ship, and every sailor, as soon as they had a chance to leave, left. So the captain quit. And it just so turned out that he quit right as I finished this course. And so the Navy said, well, we can't have a submarine with no captain, so we'll leave the captain on the Olympia, and Marquet, you're going to the Santa Fe. So now I was the poor guy going to the Santa Fe. And the problem wasn't bad morale, bad performance. I was the guy who went to those places. I was like the Navy fix-it guy. That's great. That's what you want, actually, because then you make it better. And then you prove what a great leader you are. Of course, when you leave, it goes back the way it was, which again, it's a double proof. Which I now don't think that's the case, but leadership means things sail on exceedingly well after you leave, because you've embedded whatever genius you have in the organization. That's what leadership is. Your leadership score starts the day you leave. Your achievement score starts the day you arrive. So don't get confused between what those 2 things are. One of the things we have executives do is we say, imagine that your bonus next year, wherever you are, is going to be dependent upon how well your team does over the next year, and you're not even there. You're not there one single day. Someone else is in charge of it. You've left the company, you've left the division, you got sent, whatever it is. That changes the way you think about it. Now, oh, I need to figure out how to get my people to make all these genius decisions that I used to make. And I think this is a super valuable way to do that, because even if you're there, you don't want to be sucked into all that decision making. So the Santa Fe was a different kind of ship. She had missile tubes, she had a different reactor. The physical configuration of the submarine was different, so the way she drove through the ocean was slightly different. And as the captain, you show up saying, well, I'm the captain. It wasn't hubris or arrogance, it was just habit. And so I'm going to give orders, and you're going to do, and you guys are going to do what you're told. And I've been a lot of places where you say, oh, safety first, where everyone can speak up. If you see a potential problem, speak up. It's on you to speak. Like, we'll blame them. It's on you to speak. And I made a mistake very early. First day on the submarine, we submerged the submarine, and we ran an exercise, and I gave an order that couldn't be done. And it was a non-event, like nothing really happened. But the officer ordered what I suggested, which was an impossible thing to do. It was essentially ordering second gear on a 1-gear motor. And when I looked at him, I said, well, why did you do this? He said, well, because you told me so. My head blew apart. And the problem now, you got to reframe the problem. The problem is not that I made a bad decision, because if you think the leader's job is to make decisions, get the team to do it, and you make a bad decision, then the problem is you made a bad decision. That's not the problem. The problem is you're the wrong guy to be making these decisions on the submarine. That's what I decided. So it wasn't I made a bad decision. The problem was I was the one making decisions. I needed to know what the team thought. So I said, and I went through the whole thing in my head, and I talked to the team about it, and I said, well, once I tell you guys what to do, it makes it harder for you guys to tell me, oh, hey, Captain, I think that's wrong, or I think that doesn't make any sense, or I have a hard time. And I will say, so I've heard everything, even though we really didn't spend too much time listening to everybody. And so I've heard all the arguments. So we're going to go north. Does that make sense? right? We good? Everybody happy? And then we add these little coercive tags. Like if you say right,
Yeah.
hey,
Leading the
so
witness.
we're all ready for the operation to start, right? Coercive tag. Hey, the deal's all ready to go, right? Coercive tag. Hey, this is a good price, right? Coercive tag. It's about getting people to agree and go along. It's about shutting down their thinking. I really don't want to hear your thinking. Now we'll say, oh, but I really want to hear your thinking. But it's a coercive tag that shuts the door on that. And it's why? Because it's a that's what we did in the Industrial Revolution. I didn't hire you for your thinking. I hired you for your hands. That's why we have all hands meetings in Silicon Valley. So you want to get rid of those coercive tags, but that's just the start of this whole language that we speak is misfit to the workplaces that we want. If you want people to just do what they're told, the language we use right now is perfect. If you want people to think, then the language we use right now does not fit. We're playing a language designed to reduce variability in a game where we need to enhance variability. If you ever go to your team and you say, hey, what do you think? Hey, do you think, like all the myriad of decisions you got to make all day long. Should we do this advertising? How much should we advertise? Where should we have? How are we doing branding? Should we hire a new agent? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, anything to do with predicting the future or basing current activities based on what you think might happen in the future. And so if you're in the old world, you say something, you'll say, oh, hey, I think, I think inflation is going to stay persistently high for a long time. What do you guys think? Well, you just ruined it because you just made it a lot harder for the person who thinks radically different to speak up. So you got to stay quiet first. And so my thing was, don't give an order. Never give an order. Let them come to me. And the magic was for them to say, here's what I intend to do. So you can do this on your team. It's very simple. It's a linguistic tool. So people say, hey, here's what the latter is, here's what I see, here's what I think, here's what I intend to do. Now, normally we say, here's what I think, here's what I see, here's what I like permission to do, which means I don't do it until you tell me to do it, which means you're glued to your cell phone all weekend long when you'd really rather be skiing. Because the team is waiting to hear from you, blah, blah, blah. And so everyone sits in stasis rather than action. And they don't own it because they can always say later, well, boss told me to do it. So that's the whole idea. So number one, I made a vow never to give an order. You cannot watch a movie. You cannot find a movie where the captain, the gang lead, Lord, the CEO, whoever it is, the head coach does not give orders. Now, the problem is you got to control something. So this is when we talk about, well, what is empowerment? If you don't control the structure of your thinking and decision-making, then you have to control the outcomes. And this is what we like, because this means I'm really important, because everyone comes to me and says, oh, hey, I think we should do this. And then you get to adjudicate. So that means you're a really big, important person. But if you create a process, if you're rigid in the process, you can release control of the outcome, because the process, how do we talk to each other? That process will result in people being able to expose their thinking. And then naturally we're going to have a better outcome, better decisions, which have more ownership. So they'll be better for that reason alone. And there'll just be more resilient, more adaptive decisions. And so that's what I did. My life was better because I was not mired in the details anymore. I don't advise not knowing your job. I learned the submarine, but when you know your job, you can get seduced into thinking that you're the guy with all the answers. And so it took me not knowing my job, but you should know your job. I think of it like you're the goalie. The ball's a decision. It's coming down the field. You want one of your players to capture it and turn it around, send it the other way. But if you have to, the goalie's going to catch the ball. But I knew as the last line of defense, and this applies only to the CEO. No one else is the last line, but as the last line of defense, the CEO, ladies and gentlemen, if you catch the ball, it's going to be, just remember, it's going to be really hard for your team to tell you you're wrong, A, and B, your brain will then attempt to convince you that you're right. And even though there's going to be evidence that the decision might not have been right, your brain will discount that. It'll have all these reasons for discounting that evidence: bad source, incorrect, not enough of it, not really sure, whatever. And it will magnify the evidence that you're right. And so now you're in self-deception mode. You don't want to be, but you're human, so it'll happen. And so you really, if you have to make a decision, every time you're the decision maker, just know that you gotta really be careful about that particular one. And we all know companies and people who made decisions and stuck with it and convinced themselves they were right in the face of overwhelming evidence that they weren't.
So let me ask you this, because you covered a lot there, but how do you get the authority to the people? Like you were the captain of the submarine, right? But you got all these people empowered to make decisions. And I know you broke it down to kind of two concepts, which was the organizational clarity, but they also had to be, you tested their competence. How do you transfer that authority to the people who work on the team?
I don't know if you quote transfer authority. Because that's, to me, it feels like that's a bit of a zero-sum game. I think I still felt like I was in control, because when they say, here's what I intend to do, I can still veto it. I get to ask questions and I can veto it. But they felt like they had more ownership of it. And so this was the ladder I was telling you about. Okay. People say, tell me what to do. I say, what do you see? This answers your question. The answer is through linguistics, through language, by simply saying, don't stop here at where you want permission. Go to here and say, this is what you intend to do. So, and if I don't answer here, you do it. The Fukushima reactor plant in Japan that got wiped out, the power systems got wiped out by the tsunami that was caused by the earthquake. And it was a permission-based organization. They wanted to vent those pressure vessels to prevent the explosion from happening. They could see temperature and pressure going up on their meters. And they could predict, hey, in 2.5 hours, we're going to explode these vessels, and it's going to be way worse, like 100 million times worse for the environment, like orders of magnitude worse, because of the physics of the kind of radioactivity. Not all radioactivity is the same. And if they had been operating at, hey, this is what we intend to do, they could send a message, email, phone call, whatever, to the CEO of the TEPCO, Toyota Electric Power Company, which owned the reactor plants. This is what we intend to do, because the rule said the CEO had to give permission for this release of fission products. And if they said, this is what we intend to do in 2 hours, because we see in 2.5 hours going to rupture, so if we don't solve it in 2 hours, that's when we're going to do this, it would have been fine, because in 2 hours, they would have gotten no response because there were no communications, and they would have done it. And that's the beauty of the thing. But they could never say afterwards, well, we thought it was a bad idea because the CEO told us, Volkswagen, whatever. So the key is you got to stop giving orders and then linguistically invite the team and to say, hey, this is what I intend to do and why. That's the key. Now I'm exposing my thinking. Why is it safe or technically or legally correct? That's the technical part. We call that technical competence. And then how does it align with what we're trying? How does it align with what we're trying to do with the company and serve the client? That's the why. Why are we doing it? Like how are we doing it safely? Why are we? So the officers come to me, hey, I intend to submerge a submarine. Why? Why now? Why here? And now we're thinking like tacticians, not just, from the genius brain of the cat. If you watch a movie, Russell Crowe walks out. We need to go here. Right. Yeah, we got to go here. Why? Well, because the captain said so.
So you were moving out of, in that management is telling people what to do, leading them is asking them questions and telling them what a win looks like, and then communicating that throughout the team. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, yeah. I mean, that the criteria for what success looks like is, I think, part of what we would call clarity, but it would be more like, how does this align with our values and what the purpose of what we try and intend to do? here's the flip side of it is, and here's the exercise we do with our client. One of them, what we do with our clients is we say, write an intent statement for your travel agent who's planning your next family vacation. So what does that look like? So what would the paragraphs be in such a statement? Well, how much authority am I going to give the person? Where are they going to operate? Hey, here's my credit card, just go buy the tickets, or no, at every step of the way, you got to come interact with me. Well, so there's trade-offs on both sides. And then what resources do you have available? What constraints? Maybe you only want to go on, you don't want to go on any place that's more that you can't get to by direct flight. I don't know what, like, well, and why are you going? Like, what's the purpose of the vacation? So a good intent statement will say something. What we want is a lot of family bonding time. So maybe it could be hiking in the daytime and then family time in the evening, or maybe it's swimming in the daytime, or maybe it's skiing. Like, so maybe it's a little bit agnostic about exactly what, but if I'm getting that to purpose. So anyway, so that's the idea. But then so now they're coming to you. Another example is I go into a workshop and we have 30 people. So we put them in tables of 5. So there's 6 tables of 5. And we want diverse tables because that generally has more results in more interesting conversations. Well, what do? Well, we look at the head of HR, and the head of HR assigns people seats based on gender, religion, skin color, native language, duration at the company, higher position, whatever, the standard things that the head of HR thinks about. Well, now people show up and there's a name tag and that's where they're sitting. So I was like, well, why are we doing that? Why don't we just say create diverse tables? So we would do that as an activity, and it takes a few minutes, but they come up with many, much more interesting things. Like, well, and then we let them brag. Hey, tell us in what way your table's diverse. And they'll start with the sort of standard things. Then they'll say, well, we have half the people read it last book. They read fiction books, and half the people read nonfiction books. Well, I never would have thought of that. On and on and on. But the big win is they chose their table. They're not hostages at their table with a bunch of nitwits they don't want to be with. They're sitting with the people that they want. And it becomes a very energetic, involved, participative group. But you do it the other way and say, oh, people really didn't participate. Yeah. Oh, then we blame them. Sorry, I was ranting. That's one of my rants.
That's all right. Let me ask you, I know that your message has resonated with people like myself, which is like this empowerment of people to work for you. So what you said is everybody here on this call today is kind of like at some level wants to go home in peace, knowing their business is taken care of. And they're like, good, the team knows what to do. They're taking care of business. They have the values they need. They understand the clarity of what we're trying to do. Right. I can breathe. What is the rub between, because I'm sure you have all these CEOs come to you who love the thought of doing this, of empowering their team, creating an environment for them to win. Where does it break down in them not doing it? Is it giving up control? What is it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's huge. That's probably number one. It's probably the image we have of what it should be. I would say it's the image of what we have of how everyone else that we've ever worked for was. That's not what it means to be like. There's no template for what I tried to create on the submarine that I could follow, that I knew of. There's probably were some out there, but I just couldn't visualize what it was like, where I would control the structure of the decision making, but release control of what actual decisions. But intent still lets you be in control. That's the beauty. Don't say, oh, just do it. We do not like that. You do not like that on a nuclear powered submarine. You don't like that in real estate, banking, tech, medicine, anything. I don't think there's anything that we like that in. So what holds us back is the image of what it means to be a leader. Number 2, the fear of giving up control, which is false in intent-based leadership, because you still can say, no, we're not doing that. And number 3 is the language that we use. So we'll say, hey, I want everyone to speak up, or I want to know what everybody thinks. Perfect example. Let's say we're the board of we're the C-suite at Boeing, and we got to make a decision to launch the Boeing 737 MAX. How does that meeting, what happens in that meeting? Well, I don't have the minutes, so I'm just this conjecture. But because I've seen a whole lot of other meetings, I'm pretty much, and I know the outcome, I suspect I know what happened. The CEO comes in and says, look, hey, we got to make this decision today. We got to make sure that we're ready to launch to launch this thing. The FAA's certified it. We got to, the purpose is to catch up with Airbus. Blah, blah, we've invested this much money, blah, 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 blah. What does everybody think? Well, since they all like their high-paying jobs, they're all going to vote yes. I don't know why I just got dark there, but in any event, they're all going to say yes. And then the CEO says, okay, great. And then a year and a half later, it turns out it was a crappy decision. Then the CEO says, well, you guys had a chance to say no. The problem is we're running the meeting wrong. And I said, well, why did you run the meeting that way? What do you mean? Well, you talked about it and then you asked people to vote. Why did you do that? I don't know. So they're just mindless. They're just following scripts that have been written into them by their ancient forefathers who were running a steel mill or a textile mill in Ireland 2 centuries ago. So that's how we're talking. So they don't even know why they run the meeting this way. Here's the way you want to run that meeting. Vote first, then discuss. And let the vote be non-binary. It's got to be like, how ready are we to launch this? Don't discuss it. Everyone's going to say, oh, but I got to let people know. That's wrong. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. They all know all that stuff that you're about to say. They already know that. Mm-hmm. And then you say, vote first. And then sometimes we use hands, sometimes we use cards, but you could just say 0 to 5, blah, blah, blah. So here's one. The buyer makes an offer. Seller doesn't like the offer. You got to make a decision. Do we reject it and make a counter, or do we accept it? I'm sure it happens 1,000 times a day. So you say, well, how confident are we? Oh, they're bluffing. They'll go higher. Oh, no, they're not. Like, that's it. Okay, well, how confident are we? 0 to 5. Boom. Now, then you got to make a decision. Or the agent or the broker's got to make it. Someone's got to make a decision, but it's now based on what everybody thinks. What they really think, not based on, hey, I think we can get a little more out of them. What do you guys think? Oh, yeah, boss, sure. Let's go back at them.
I like that. So the intent allows you to kind of build trust between each other, right? Because you're able to ask them questions that allows them to think about the problem, not just do the problem. And
Trust Trust means I believe you're trying to do the right thing. It has nothing to do with whether you made the right decision. And once you understand that, then you can build trust. Otherwise, I say, it ends up being stupid. It's like saying, oh, I trust you to go buy the lottery ticket. Oh, you bought the wrong lottery ticket, you idiot. I don't trust you anymore, because we can't hold people accountable for future. We can only hold them account for future impacts. We can only hold them accountable for the decision they make now based on the information we know now, based on the probabilities of what might happen in the future. If there's some obvious things like the weathermen say, it's 20% chance of rain, and it's really important not to get wet, and you don't bring an umbrella, well, that's on you. But the point is, you have to decouple the outcome of the decision from the decision process. And this is super, super hard for people, because we do it all the time, and we naturally assume the same thing. If some person just seems to be making the wrong decision over and over again, there's something about the decision process that's broken, because you're not consistently making good decisions.
So let me ask you this: how do you maintain it as a culture? Like, if you want to empower people and okay, we're going to have, what's your intent and what are you trying to do? And is it connected to anything that we're trying to do as an organization, or that serves the customer? When it does go wrong and there's mistakes, and how do you not blame them for it and yet still encourage them to follow that process of thinking through the process to try and get the same outcome?
Well, you already paid tuition, you might as well learn. And number two is you had a chance to say no. So let's say in this case here, we're bringing a SEAL team onto the submarine with a helicopter. You can see it's nice weather. The waves are like the ocean's flat. This never happens. But even now, there's a person who might be slide over, and the helicopter's drifted off to the side. Now this rope's getting taut, and this sailor's got to decide: do I let go at some point, or do I risk getting dragged over myself? And so you say, okay, well, let's say it wasn't good weather. Now we have an alternate plan where they got to come up this way, which is a lot harder. And if we didn't plan for bad weather and it was bad weather, then we got to say, well, what do we learn from that? And the other thing is, you had a chance. Like your team would say, okay, we brief it the day before. Okay, SEAL team picking up SEAL team tomorrow. Planning assumption number one: good weather, seas less than 2 feet. Blah 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 blah. So main plan is picking them up on the main deck. Period. That's the end of the brief. And I'm like, what about if there's planning assumption seas less than 2 feet turns out not to be true? Oh yeah, well then we'll have to go and call it off. Like, no, we know as a submarine we can physically do it in much worse seas. It's just we need an alternate plan. So that was on you. You had a chance to speak up and you didn't speak up. So go look in the mirror. That's the person to go blame. That's the beauty of intent. Again, it's not, you don't just let your team do stuff. And you got to always ask questions. You got to let them. And when you ask questions, people shouldn't get upset. Oh, well, don't you trust me? You're asking me questions. But again, this goes back to, yeah, I trust you you're trying to make the right decision. Doesn't mean it's the right decision because I decouple the decision from the outcome.
Well, this all worked out with back to the Santa Fe. It was the worst submarine. You didn't know it. You empowered your team. The numbers I heard you say, and a lot of folks on here, we have a hard time retaining people, right? Where was it after you took command? Because it finished, you did turn the ship around through this process. What were the metrics that made?
Yeah, well, thanks. Some of them I forget to say. Look, number one, we got the highest score in the history of the Navy for operating the submarine 12 months later. Number two, 100% of the sailors over the next 12 months, starting the day I got on board and started this program, which was basically the very day because I made this mistake. We had to change everything immediately. 100% of the sailors who had a chance to either to stay in the Navy or not elected to stay in the Navy, 33 out of 33. And number three, Stephen Covey, because of all the great things that were happening, Covey came and rode the ship, and author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was great. I was a huge Stephen Covey fan. The book's amazing. But now I have a personal relationship with Stephen Covey. And that was amazing. So then when I wrote my book, he helped me out, and on and on. So the guy who won the most out of this whole thing was probably me, even though we had 10 submarine commanders come from our crew, from our group of officers, and that's there's only like 15 officers on a submarine. So that's really highly disproportionate. So I felt, of course, I have this deep satisfaction with my life that at least it mattered a little bit because I made the lives of other people better. Plus, we served the nation. But at the end, I was probably the guy who won the most.
Which is how leadership. That's where everybody on here owns their own business. They should win the best for taking all the risk. And if you empower people to go to work for you, you're going to win.
I agree.
That's great.
That's one thing that I hear people talk about servant leadership, which has some concepts which I say, yeah, I think I could probably that probably sounds okay, but don't make it sacrificial leadership.
No.
Yeah. It's not you nailing yourself.
That's right.
To a cross so that your team can somehow do something. It should not feel like that.
Well, that's what my mother says. She says, "Get off the cross. We need the wood." And I think every leader needs to hear that. You'd be very.
I like a good Irish mom saying.
Yeah, well, that's the danger of leadership. We think we have to be the hero, the one who dies like Braveheart. and we don't, and that's
Exactly.
not the goal. Listen, you've been
Yeah.
very, very generous with your time. Would you mind coming backstage and talking to some of our clients where I know they'll have maybe some more specific questions from their world about how do we empower their teams, get them to take a risk? So if you're good hanging on for another 20, 25 minutes, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, I'll give my best shot.
All right, good. For our coaching clients, we'll now head backstage for some Q&A session with Captain Marquet. For everyone else, thank you for tuning into the show. I highly recommend that you pick up Captain Marquet's books, Turn the Ship Around and Leadership is Language. And please check out his YouTube channel and his leadership nudges there. On the next Curious CEO, join us as we delve into the world of innovation with disruption strategist, speaker, and former Deloitte consultant, Sean Kanungo. He'll talk about how to embrace bold ideas and fostering collaboration within your teams. So until next time, stay curious, my friends.
Thank you for joining us on this month's Curious CEO. If you're ready to take your leadership to the next level, maybe it's time for you to work with a Buffini certified leadership coach. Our coaches will help you identify and leverage your natural leadership style, develop a strong organizational culture, improve recruiting and retention, and increase the profitability of your business. And among the benefits of our leadership coaching membership is a backstage pass to the Curious CEO that allows you to ask your questions directly to Dermot and his amazing guests. If you'd like to see if Buffini leadership coaching is right for you, schedule your complimentary leadership consultation using the URL on your screen.